Animorphs for the Game Boy Color is quite possibly the worst game I have ever played. That may be a slight exaggeration, but those are the words that went through my head when I started playing it. I discovered this game while looking at a list of Game Boy Color games. Since it starts with A, it was naturally near the top of the list. Suddenly struck by the nostalgia of reading the books as a kid, I decided that I had to play it. I had always been aware of the existence of an Animorphs video game, but after some slight googling and Wikipedia link clicking, I discovered that they actually made 3 of the things. This one for Game Boy Color, Shattered Reality for PlayStation 1, and Know the Secret for Windows. And all of them have terrible reviews. Or at least 2 of them do. I couldn't find any reviews for Know the Secret, not that I particularly tried. I did look at a YouTube video of it though, and I can confirm that it looks awful. Animorphs was released in November of 2000 for the Game Boy Color, developed by Runny Fun and published by Ubisoft. According to Moby Games, Runny Fun was actually the development team Run and Gun, forced to temporarily change their name since Ubisoft thought having the word gun in their logo would offend parents, though what really should have offended parents was this shitty game. I had a lot of trouble trying to research Run and Gun, since that is also the name of an entire genre of video games, so I could only find them on Moby Games as well, and according to them, Run and Gun only made 2, or possibly 3, games, as well as 1 cancelled game, with Animorphs being their last release. When you boot up the game, you're met with what some might call music. I wouldn't say the music is terrible, but I wouldn't call it good either. I'll just play you a little bit of a few different tracks so you can get what I'm talking about. I'll be nice here and let them off the hook for this music. It's not pleasant during the game, but I'll at least pretend that it's due to the composer's inexperience with the Game Boy sound hardware. Speaking of the composer, apparently he also did the music for the first 2 Spider-Man movie tie-in games, as well as animation or motion capture for Uncharted 2, God of War Ascension, and XCOM 2. Good for him on moving up in the world, assuming that Moby Games didn't mix up 2 different people named Randy Wilson. Back to the game itself. I have to admit something now, just so you don't get the wrong idea. I did not beat this game. In fact, I didn't even beat the first level, but I got enough of the game's mechanics to understand how horrible the rest of the experience would be. The game is a top-down experience in the overworld, and walking around and talking to people is easy enough. In the first mission you play as Cassie, and you begin in a room with all the other Animorphs and Axe. Talking to them reveals the beginning of this mission involves going to the mall pet shop and helping with some berserk animals. Moving around in the overworld at this point isn't too bad. I've definitely played better, and I can't help but think this aspect of the game would be better if they had adopted strict grid movement like Pokemon, since the layout of certain parts of the world is too weird to navigate. One thing I had an issue with was how accurate you had to be to enter through certain doors. Some doors, like the one on the barn you begin in, are quite large. Others, like the one on the mall, are very small. When I started this game, I couldn't even manage to enter the mall door for quite a while, until I realized my issue was accuracy. You can take an animal form through the start menu. All animals seem to move faster than your normal human form, though you can't talk to NPCs when you're an animal. Some animals also seem to have the ability to do special things, though the only one I experienced was the snake's ability to move through a crack in the wall. One thing to be careful of is that you aren't allowed to morph in front of NPCs. If you do, it's instant game over. Thankfully though, you are warned about it when you open the menu in front of an NPC. However, if they were going to include the warning, I don't see why they didn't just lock you out of morphing in those circumstances to begin with. One odd thing about the morphing menu is that you have to press A once before you are able to pick your morph or exit the menu. It seems that the instructions load up as a standard dialog box instead of simply being something they displayed on screen. It's really minor, and once you understand it, it's not a huge problem, but it is confusing the first couple of times you open the menu. But really, the overworld isn't this game's main issue. This game's issue is the combat. Animorphs uses a turn-based combat system that one could generously call Pokemon-like. You acquire morphs for your character by beating up animals in combat that you can see on the overworld. Upon entering combat, if you are in your human form, you receive a message saying that you can't fight in your human form and are immediately forced to morph into one of your animal forms, and your opponent gets a free attack. If you're already morphed when you enter combat, there's a random chance whether you or your opponent will move first. Each animal form has 4 attacks. Most attacks seem to be fundamentally the same, with some arbitrarily being stronger. Sometimes it seemed that it would switch which attacks were stronger depending on what enemy you were fighting. Only once did I notice a super effective message pop up, which was at the beginning when my dog used Bite against a mouse. There are also attacks that increase defense. There may also be attacks that increase attack, though I didn't see any in my short time playing the game. You may have noticed that my description of the combat was lacking confidence, and that is because nothing is explained in the game as to how the combat works. You cannot see any of your form's stats besides HP, assuming they even do have other stats. You cannot view a description of any of your moves. You cannot see types, assuming that those exist, which is only an inference from the existence of super effective moves. Since I couldn't figure out any decent strategy due to lack of information, my strategy tended to be mashing my most powerful move, which was the starting dog's Bite for the entirety of the time I played. When your HP reaches 0, you are forced to demorph and then morph into one of your other forms, and the defeated morph is removed from your inventory. You are limited to 5 animal forms, and if you run out of animal forms, you get an instant game over. Your human form has an HP meter, but it can't take damage, at least in the portion of the game I played, so I'm unsure why it exists. However, I will again be nice and believe the possibility that comes into play in one of the later levels. Damage to each of your animal forms is retained between battles, which irritates me since one of the abilities of morphing from the books is that your wounds were instantly healed when you did it, but I can't accept that change along with the limited number of morphs for the purpose of a video game. Animals aren't the only opponents you can encounter. You can encounter aliens. I initially assumed that these were random encounters, however I quickly realized that these encounters were just invisible events that triggered when you crossed their chosen tile. Aliens aren't anything special most of the time, but you don't obtain their forms by defeating them. Defeating aliens gets you a food item that heals your current animal's health upon obtaining it. There also was the super food item that I saw once, but it didn't seem to do anything more than the regular food items, since they both healed to max. Though again, the difference probably matters more in later levels. I decided to play this game because, from the screenshots and description on Wikipedia, I assumed it was some sort of RPG. And I guess it is, from the most lenient of definitions, but there's very little choice in how to play. Different animals are flat out better than others, meaning that the only real choices you have in gameplay is whether you want to win or not. There are no levels or experience of any kind, meaning the closest this game has to progression is replacing your weaker animals with stronger ones. Though Dog is arguably the strongest, at least to the point I gave up, which was right before where I finally met the stronger lion and elephant animals, and Dog is the one you start with. According to this Game Facts guide, the only real purpose to the non-dog morphs is fodder to beat the elephant, or extra lives to protect your dog if you get into a bind before that. I didn't get to this point, but there are side-scrolling mini-games at the end of each level. But they don't seem very fun, and even if they were, they wouldn't be enough to make them a monotonous chore that the rest of the game is worthwhile. This game is 4 missions long, as well as a 5th secret mission that was apparently only discovered in 2016. That factoid alone is possibly the most interesting thing about this game. I only played about half of the first mission, but the game is about 7 hours long according to GameFAQs, which is way longer than I want to play this game for. The last thing I want to point out about this game is that the save system is password-based. That isn't anything too bad, but if you fail to grab your password before you get a game over, you're going to get set back because the game doesn't give you your password upon a game over. Even though I saw the review scores, I wasn't expecting the game to be this bad. I was hoping to get a short, easy romp with the aesthetics of a book series I enjoyed, but instead I got an overly confusing, difficult mess with terrible music and graphics. The only positive this game gave me was the joy that I never received it as a child. I wonder if it would be possible to create a decent Animorphs video game. To be quite honest, the books never struck me as ones that could be molded into a video game form. The morphing described in the books is very freeform, and the plot of the books makes it so that morphing at certain times is not a good choice for the characters. Perhaps a game where you play as Andalites would work, or something set in the universe but without morphing, though at that point you may as well disconnect it from the IP. I do have a legitimate love for the Animorphs series, so I really hoped that this game would be decent. Oh well, not like I was expecting much from what was effectively a shovelware tie-in game. Thanks for watching. If you go to my channel, you'll see that I've done videos on Digimon Rumble Arena and Pokemon games recently, and you might want to watch those too if you like this one. Feel free to subscribe while you're at it. I also have a Twitter and a Twitch. Thanks, see you next time.